things to rest about how we actually were. I've been asked hundreds, I mean literally hundreds of times, how did you guys create a partnership with Tony Robbins? Hundreds of times. And I haven't told the story often, and I certainly haven't told it here, but I'll share it with you. I'll make it brief because I don't want to take away from Tony's time. Sometime early in 1988, my college roommate, one of my best friends, gave me a book, Bernie. It was one generation before the one that you read. It was actually Unlimited Power. It was a hard copy. And you remember it had this little paper cover around it. On the back was a picture of this 25-year-old kid who was walking on fire. I believe it was Fifth Avenue, New York, wasn't it? Yeah. So, so I took it home. I laid it on my nightstand. And about once every week, I'd turn it up and I'd look at it and I'd say, he knows something I don't know. And I'd lay it back down. I did it about 3 or 4 weeks. Finally, I decided, I'm digging into this thing now. Now's the time. Just as Bernie says, kind of ironic, we haven't talked about this, but like within the next 2 days, and probably over a weekend, I'd devour the book. So I set a goal. I added this to my goals for 1988, and that was to meet Anthony Robbins and take his seminar. Only one problem. I called Robbins Research International, and every single weekend he was doing a seminar for the rest of the year. I was also doing a seminar. So I called back and I said, well, I'll tell you what, how about I pay him to come do a seminar for me? They said, well, yeah, you can do that. It's $20,000 a day. And that's back when $20,000 was a lot of money too, by the way. So I did a little, it was $20,000 a day for 2.5 days. The first half night, or half day rather, which went into the morning, was an opportunity for about 50 of my clients to do the firewalk, and some very good friends who I've invited as well. So we flew, I made the decision, bring him on in. I got 50 of my doctors on the phone. I said, I need you to write a check for $1,000. Here's what it's for, just trust me, just be there, right? And I saw something really amazing happen that night. I saw people come in who had no idea what they were there for. And I saw them come out to the parking lot of the Atlanta Perimeter Center Marriott Hotel, and there were bonfires, and the flames were 8, 10 feet tall, and they knew for the first time they were going to be walking through that in about another hour and a half. It's amazing. You should have seen the state changes. It was really pretty crazy. Well, bottom line, I'm going to fast forward. The bottom line, by the time we get out there to do the firewalk, I have one of these holy shit moments. When I brought these people here. When he walked in, first of all, this guy's not human. You guys know that, right? He can walk through that gap. You think, and who gets to go second? I'm like, I've got to go second. I got that thought the minute you walked up there. Well, the bottom line, I didn't even feel heat. Most of you have done firewalks by now would attest to that. So, bottom line, throughout that weekend, I saw people's lives transform. I went to lunch with Tony the next day, and on the ride to lunch, we went to lunch at Houston's or Friday's over at the Perimeter Center Mall. And I asked Tony 2 questions. These were not thought out in advance. I asked him, what's the purpose of your organization? And Tony said to bring the greatest transformation to the largest number of people in the shortest period of time. I just rattled it right off. So I thought, this guy's not only driven, he's really clear about what he's up to. Then I asked him the second question. The second question was, would it further fulfill the purpose of your organization to have a branch in healthcare? Now, I've got to tell you, I didn't think about those in advance. What I know now, the power of questions, Power Talk tape number, 7, 5, somewhere. The power of questions, you guys learned about it yesterday over at the seminar. 2 questions. And I thought back later and I thought, you're not that brilliant, man. And then I realized, of course, that it just flowed through me. It came from above, just flowed through me. The obvious answer was yes. So now, how do we put it together? Which that's where the next 2 years came from. So, the bottom line, it's hard to put into words what I have heard from the people who were in that room, and for me personally, the impact that has had and your work has had on my life. I can't even begin to tell you. I want to introduce you a little differently tonight. We also have an acknowledgement for you that I'll give you as well. But I get to introduce Tony. I've introduced Tony at the beginning of probably 6 or 8 different seminars, but this was going to be a little bit different. I'm sure Tony at this point in time has been introduced by political figures, heads of state throughout the world, professional athletes, professional coaches, Wall Street executives. I thought about that. How can I introduce him that's really unique and really speaks in a way that most people would have never heard of it, or most people would have never known about it. So I'm going to take you back to a board meeting, Gary, that we were having down in La Jolla, in which Tony time was a little actually more extended that particular day. I think the board meeting was about an hour and a half late. Finally, my partner said, Bass, you're going to have to get in the car, drive out to the castle, lasso Tony, and bring him down here. So, all right, no problem, I can go do this. So I go out to the castle, I get Tony, we're now 2 hours late, right, for the meeting. People have departing flights to fly back at. This was like a, fly in, fly out, right? So the bottom line is we're driving down this ridge at the top of the mountain, quickest way from the castle down to I-5. And you know what was right in front of us. There's a table set up over there, and there are a couple of girls selling cookies. Tony says, wait a minute, stop, slow down, pull over here. And of course, what am I thinking? Nice, but we got to go, Tony. So Tony said, by the way, I left my wallet. You have 20 bucks? I said, sure. That's 20 bucks I ever spent. So Tony gets out, he says, what are you guys doing? They said, well, we're selling cookies. And he said, well, how many do you have? And they looked at each other. Well, let's start counting. They had like 14 or 15 cookies left. He said, well, would you take 20? They were selling for like a quarter a piece, right? He said, would you take $20 for them? And these little girls' eyes got like that big. He said, but here's what I want you to do. He said, you can keep those cookies and sell them, take the money and go invest in more cookies, right? So he gets back in the car and takes off. And as I look back on that now, I realized that was, of the many gifts that Tony has given me, one of the most incredible gifts that I've gotten from him is the value of taking that extra moment that you talk about so often. Because if you take that extra moment, even when you're behind, even when you're rushed, you take that extra moment in a way that gets you closer to your Creator or closer to your fellow man, you've created a moment you won't soon forget. And that's what allows me to stand here and tell the story 25 years ago. So I really am basically saying that I'm introducing Tony as the man behind the camera. Tony the giver. Everyone else, I'm sure, introduces him the talent, the energy, the passion, the knowledge, all that stuff. But the guy behind the camera, let me state that differently. The guy who does things of that nature where there is no camera around, that's a man that we are all proud to call our partner, and a man that we're all proud to call you our friend. So I just ask that you welcome our friend with a rousing ovation, Tony Robbins.
First of all, thanks. How many of you came the other day for a little portion of the program over there? I want to make sure I gave you. I'm in between there and my next session. I'm giving a talk at my talk. It's part of my life for these years. But the reason is because what else are you going to do with your life? They're so emotional being here because I look around this room and it's so beautiful to see how this has grown because of such goodness and such good people. Greatness, without a doubt, but it starts with goodness. Some damn good people here. And I came to an event to speak very cheaply now, I discovered. Jesus, how the hell did you get me at that price just so maybe a partner afterwards? Shit. But I came to an event, what touched me so deeply in that event was when they first offered to come do this, and I heard about a third party, somebody else obviously negotiated that deal, clearly. But when I heard about it, I was like, they have how many people? They have 50 people, and they want to pay $50,000 for me to come and do this? I mean, that's not right. Tell me to get more people. Because my goal was, of course, to touch as many human beings as I could. But what really touched me so deeply, and what made me feel such a deep connection to Paul, and then to Gary, and then Renee, and Brad was always already working with me at the time. Brad was legal counsel in my company. But those three is where it really started, and later on the Bernie. But that very first night was, holy shit, these people care as much as I do. These people really care for these clients as much as I do. And I had not ever experienced that before. That's why I became a partner. It wasn't because I was looking for another avenue although I saw certainly, getting my mission out to more people was a wonderful idea. It was just the idea that it's so rare to see somebody who cares that much. And I think the real reason you're all here 25 years later with your celebration here is because the people in this room care that much. You can't fake that caring. And I know not everybody cares equally and not everybody gives completely, but I think for this organization to have prospered for that long and have plenty of competitors come and go, it's really there. And I have to start with Gary. I have to say Gary cared that much when nobody else did, before anybody else was here. And I really think he deserves another acknowledgement for that. I see the tears in the edge of his eyes also, and he's proud of what the hell he's done here, and he should be so damn proud. Because he's a leader, he went first, he did it before anybody else really did in this industry on any scale. And then, he found the right partner in Paul, because he found somebody with the same level of integrity and commitment. And when I found these guys, they not only cared, but they had a work ethic. I can't stand people who, want something for nothing. Because I know even if you get it, you'll have no inner pride. What makes us proud is when we know we forced ourselves to do things that are incredibly difficult, but that they served. And these two, I was blown away by that. And Renee came, and she was such a light. She lit up the room. You had all this testosterone banging around the room. And you brought in this total light. She had this energy and bubbliness, and she was in for whatever it would take. And I just looked around that and said, nothing but good could come from this. And good with high standards equals greatness. And so I said, I'm in. I was definitely in. And I went to that event that weekend and led the group of people and had a much higher pitched voice before I had done things to my vocal cords that made me have such a masculine sounding voice today. And but it was really, really touching. And so I can remember those earliest days we're trying to figure out how do we leverage this, because the biggest challenge for me was, just like everybody else here, how do you get this done in the same amount of time? And I'm reaching out to reach as many millions of people as I can. How do we do this too? And so we came up with this idea of leveraging it, because I lost my voice. I'd had this experience at my normal event where I lost it so badly one time, I literally could not speak a word. And we were in San Diego, fortunately, which is where my company was based. And I woke up the next morning on a 3-day program, and literally it was like knives in my throat. You couldn't hear a whisper. So I wrote a note, and I asked somebody to read it, and I said, listen, I've recorded all of my seminars I've ever done. If you guys will wait an hour, we'll go get a video, we'll put it on, and this portion of the morning's content is teaching, it's not interventions. So I know you'll learn the core content, and you want to go for it. Maybe by the afternoon my voice will work. And we did it. I sat in the back, and I watched something magical happen. People raising their hands and speaking at the screen, and it was like, wow, there is a future. And right after that is when we met. And I said, I know how we're going to do this. I said, we'll do it with great coaching, great facilitating, but in the beginning, since it's the technology and everybody knows, we'll do it on film. And we brought all these families together of all the companies you all now represent, all the practices you now represent. And we just had them come together and said, tell me all your problems. That's how we started. We had a whole day, write down every problem you got, tell me every problem. I hate Susie, Susie is a bitch. That's the first one. I hate this, I hate that, we can't figure that way. And I just, the first day, took all the problems and sent everybody away, and then we came to the team and sat down and brainstormed all the solutions and put together all the elements. And then I got Renee and some other people to try and capture all things I was dictating as fast as we could, and we came in the next day and boom, we went and did these processes on people and we watched their lives transform. And it became an incredible process for every 3 months. We came together for a year, basically, if I remember correctly. And we did this. And we got, what was beautiful is what all of you get to see, which is what I rarely get to see. I get to see it, I have a group called my Platinum Partners. And for that group, I get to see them over the course of years, like you do. But otherwise, I'm on a room with 5,000 or 10,000 people, and I get to see individual faces and eyes, and I hear stories, and I'll bump into someone. I bumped into someone today at the seminar, who was at a seminar I did when we had the 9/11 experience when I was in Hawaii. He's a man who stood up after a woman cried uncontrollably, talking about she left a message the night before. She was inspired by a talk I gave and said, I love you, I'm going to marry you, I'm sorry for what I said. And he was at the top of the World Trade Center, and he called her at 3 in the morning, Hawaii time, and told her, honey, I have to leave you a message, I'm sorry, I got your message, I want to marry you too, there's just one problem. The building's on fire, and I'm not going to get out. And he said to her at the time, he said, you've got to be wondering what this means. I just want you to know, first of all, I'm going to die happy because I know you really love me. And he said, you're probably wondering because her previous boyfriend had been murdered. And before she came to my seminar, he wanted to marry her, and she said no, she didn't want to get close again to somebody. And that night I inspired her to call him, make this happen. And he said, I don't know what this means really, but maybe God's telling you don't ever wait to love again. And don't wait after me, don't wait ever to love again. And she played it for us. And everyone was crying, and this man stood up, and here he was tonight. This is part of life. His name is Assad. He stood up and he said, I'd like to cry with you, but I'm from Pakistan. And for me, it's retribution. And it was like somebody set off World War II in the middle of the room. And there were Jewish people in the room who lived in the occupied territories, and there were people from all over the world. We were translating, I think at that time, 7 languages. We had a couple thousand people, battery members. It was intense. And I learned how to take that around. I took this man on stage who had been trained in an Al-Qaeda camp. He's here tonight. And his father, at the last minute, sent him to Berkeley, which is pretty close to an Al-Qaeda camp, I think, you know. And then he got dragged to this event of mine, and there he was that day, and he told people, my only regret is I wasn't one of the men who was on the plane doing the bombing, going into the building. And I got him on stage, and I got this man who was a Jewish man whose parents lived in the occupied territories, who worked in the World Trade Center. So he would have been dead if he'd been working that day instead of my seminar. He lost 100 of his friends. And these two men who would normally hate each other, and we put them on stage, and over a period of about 45 minutes to an hour, using the very tools you guys, I think, all know at this stage, we melded them together, and they became dear friends. And all the Jewish people and all the Muslims in the rooms came together on their own and had sessions day after day to figure out how they're going to spread this. And that was, right, what, 13, 14 years ago, I guess, right? More than that, 14 years ago. And they still, Assad is on tonight. Haven't seen him in probably 8 years. He walks up to me and says, my life is still transformed, shares me the story. He's never gone back. He wrote a book called My Jihad, My Way of Peace, how he transformed from wanting to be a terrorist to being a man of peace. And so at this stage of my life, I get to show up places and see what's happened 10 and 20 years later. And this is a night I won't forget because I love the people at this table, and Bernie, I want to acknowledge you as well, because Bernie came in at a very clear time. I could not personally continue to support at the same level, just my life and schedule and the elements that were going on for me. And Bernie showed up with a level of just passion and strength and caring and leadership and focus. It made me breathe. I felt like there's somebody who's got the shoulders that these people all work around the clock. There were so many artists at the table. And some of you know what I mean by artist now, in terms of artist, entrepreneur, manager, leader. And there's so many great artists, me too. And all these great artists want to give, do it all. And here's a guy who wants to give, but he's going to really organize this. He's going to help manage this. He's going to help lead this. He's going to partner with these guys and make it happen. It made me breathe. It took some weight off my shoulders and made me feel like, wow, I trust this guy, because this guy will not let this fail in his view, and he will make it succeed. And he'll do it because he knows what's right. And I think a huge reason why we're here is this man, this lady, Brad for continuity, and this man for his entrepreneurial leadership skills and organizational skills to make it happen. So to me, it's just a pleasure to see here. And I only can imagine, because I'm not in your practices, but the ability to do something that you love and your ability to do something where lives truly change. Where you know you don't just change their practice, you change their life. And you see these communities of people come together, from some of them times backbiting, some of them just living with each other and experiencing each other, handling each other, I should say, to really loving upon each other and building kind of a family. I don't know that what you can do that would be more worthwhile. So it's wonderful you can earn a great income from it or a living from it, and we can build a great business from it. But I really believe the blessing of this organization comes because motive does matter. And what the reason you do it for, you can't fake. And I think from what I can see in this organization, the reason it's continued is the motive truly is to serve. And if service is your drive, then love will be your reward. And if you manage it well business-wise, so will economics. So great economics with a life of meaning and lots of love. Can't think of anything much greater. And I'm very, very privileged you invited me to come back to celebrate your 25th anniversary. And I just want to acknowledge you for raising this child to young adulthood and now take this bitch to maturity.